Carrig is a young shapeshifter who lives with his family in the mountains. Although he is capable of taking on human form, the boy lives as a cougar and is forbidden from interacting with humans. However, over time, his desire to get to know humans more closely grew, so the boy decided to leave his family of origin and was adopted by a human family. One day, while having breakfast with his adoptive parents and siblings, Carrig sees a news story in the newspaper about animal attacks and discovers that several accidents involving different species have been happening lately. That morning, after saying goodbye to Marlin and Donald, the boy gets in the car with his adoptive mother, and Melody insists on accompanying them on the trip to Carrig's new school. Throughout the journey, the boy realizes that he is being followed by two crows and wonders if they are also shapeshifters. At dusk, the family decides to stop at a hotel to rest after a long trip, and the crows remain on their tail. During the night, Carrig hears a noise coming from outside and walks to the window in an attempt to understand what is happening. At that moment, he sees a pack of wolves running toward an alley, and suddenly the lights in the neighboring building go out. In the morning, the family returns to the road and, a few hours later, finally arrives at Clearwater High. Upon getting out of the car, Carrig's suspicions are confirmed, and he discovers that the crows that were following his vehicle are students from that school. At that moment, Lisa Clearwater, the school principal, appears to greet him and, after welcoming him, asks how the boy was found by Anna Ralston. According to the woman, Carrig's biological parents were never found. A few years ago, while working as a social worker, Anna received a call to rescue the boy. However, seeing him frightened and suspicious of everyone around him, she decided to adopt him and convinced her husband to welcome Carrig into their home. When the boy was about to start high school, Anna received an invitation to enroll him at Clearwater High and thought it would be a good opportunity for him to make new friends, as he had always felt very lonely and out of place in the city where he lived. After answering all of Anna's questions, Lisa asks to speak with Carrig alone and soon reveals that she knows the secret the boy has been hiding for so many years. According to the principal at that school, all members are shapeshifters, so the young man no longer needs to hide his transformations. Suddenly, the school alarm starts ringing and the principal leaves to check what is happening. At that moment, she discovers that Anna and Melody are walking around the campus and asks her assistant to help her take them away, as that area is restricted. Seeing all those animals of different species gathered together, Carrig is filled with joy, as he has never seen so many shapeshifters in one place before. While walking through the school hallways, Carrig meets Jeffrey and his pack. Immediately, the two young men establish an enmity, but James manages to arrive in time to stop the fight. After being introduced to the entire school, Anna says goodbye to her son, and as she and Melody walk back to the vehicle, Andrew Milling, the millionaire who finances the institution, arrives on campus. After saying goodbye to his family, Carrig is introduced to Andrew and reveals that he abandoned his life in the mountains to live with humans because he felt that something was missing that could not be fulfilled if he chose to live as a cougar forever. As soon as he arrives in his room, Carrig is introduced to the school rules, and as soon as the principal leaves, a squirrel appears at the window. At that moment, the boy opens the window and the rodent invades the space to introduce itself. According to Holly, she has been assigned to be his guide and takes him to his first shapeshifting class. Before beginning the transformations, Mr. Elwood reminds the young people that they are only allowed to use their powers during class and states that they must be very careful not to be seen by humans during the transformation process. As he has just arrived at school, Carrig is chosen to demonstrate his powers, but before he can reveal his animal form, Brandon transforms. The bison boy finds it very difficult to control his powers and, as a result, is unable to remain in his human form for very long. Seeing how easily his classmate transformed, Carrig feels insecure and decides to give up on the transformation, as he is completely disconnected from his animal form. However, with Lissa's help, Carrig manages to remember his past life, walking in the forest with his biological family, and then assumes his true form. The principal then orders everyone to transform, and Carrig realizes that he is in a school full of wolves. At that moment, Lissa states that, at that school, Carrig will learn to live with his human and animal sides, becoming a mediator between the two worlds. Hours later, while resting in his room, the young man receives a visit from Brandon and discovers that he will be his new roommate. Suddenly, Holly appears and says it's time to go to the cafeteria. After getting his food, Carrig meets Dorian, the boy who has the ability to transform into a cat. Before going to Clearwater High, Dorian lived as a pet for a human family and was caught red-handed opening a can of sardines. After demonstrating his animal form, Carrig began to be more respected by his classmates, but he also began to be feared by weaker animals. As a result, some students began to avoid him, as his mere presence represented a great threat. Since his animal form is a small hare, Bo tries to stay out of trouble, but ends up getting into trouble with Jeffrey. Seeing the defenseless boy in danger, Carrig confronts the bully to defend him and ends up getting into trouble. While the wolves try to intimidate the newcomer, James appears and, once again, manages to calm the situation down. That night, while dreaming of his family, Carrig is awakened by Brandon, who transforms in his sleep and accidentally destroys his own bed. According to him, this usually happens once or twice a week, and upon hearing this, Carrig realizes that the next few nights will not be as peaceful as he would like. The next day, during combat class, Berta and Brendan are chosen for a confrontation, but the bison decides to flee before the duel even begins. Despite being an extremely strong animal, Brandon declares himself a pacifist, so Carrig is chosen to take his place. When he realizes that the boy is unsure of his abilities, Andre decides to help him and asks him to inhale the scent of a small bag containing cougar urine. After transforming, the feline invades the battlefield and, despite being much smaller than Berta, establishes his dominance through strength. Next, Leroy and Dorian are invited to face each other, but upon smelling the foul odor emitted by his opponent, the cat flees the fight and hands over the victory on a silver platter. At the end of class, Andrew decides to talk to Carrig and offers to be his mentor. He then hands him the small bag of urine and tells him that he has a promising future. Jealous of seeing the school's sponsor giving Carrig more attention than all the other students, Jeffrey decides to challenge him to a duel against two wolves and says that if the boy wins, they will leave him alone. In the late afternoon, the young man accompanies his new friends to the treehouse and tells them that he will participate in a duel against the wolves. Upon hearing this, Brandon begins to worry about the possibility of his friend being expelled, but Carrig says he is tired of hearing taunts. When she realizes she won't be able to convince him not to participate in the fight, Holly says she will be there to support her friend, and Brandon says he can't wait for those wolves to be defeated. So that night, the trio sneaks out of the dormitory, and Carrig sniffs the small bag before transforming. Upon arriving at the agreed location, Carrig asks who the wolves are that will face him, and then realizes he has been lured into a trap. Instead of fighting two wolves, the boy is surrounded by Jeffrey and his entire pack, but he still doesn't give up the fight. Despite being stronger than those wolves, Carrig ends up being attacked from behind, and all his opponents join forces to strike him. Seeing her friend in trouble, Holly pushes Brandon off the cliff so that the bison can go to his aid, and while her friend distracts the wolves, Carrig attacks. At that moment, Jeffrey and his pack have no choice but to retreat and accept defeat. The next morning, during class, James notices that some of his students are injured and orders them to go to the infirmary. When asked what caused their injuries, the young people come up with a variety of excuses, but it is not difficult to see that they were injured during a fight. When he is about to be questioned by the principal to tell his version of what happened, Carrig receives an invitation to take a walk with Andrew and, during the walk, discovers that the man already knows what happened the night before. According to the millionaire, a true cougar should not need help to defeat those wolves, even though it was 4 against 1. Since he left his biological family at a very young age, Carrig didn't have time to learn how to hunt, so Andrew decides to teach him, as he wants the boy to become a true predator. After the outing, Andrew takes his pupil back to school and gets scolded by Lissa, who forbids him from giving preferential treatment to any student. The principal then goes to talk to Carrig and tells him that if he wants to stay at that school, he will have to follow the rules like everyone else, so he must never again engage in combat with other students outside of class hours. As soon as Lissa leaves, Holly and Brandon show up to ask what happened, and during the conversation, Carrig spots Lou walking toward the forest. The boy immediately decides to go after her, and they both find a group of teachers talking about the animal attacks that have been happening lately. They believe that the animals did not organize these attacks on their own, which means that shapeshifters are involved in this plan. The problem is that if humanity finds out what is happening, peaceful coexistence between the two species will become impossible. Therefore, Lissa and the other members of the Woodwalker Council need to devise a plan to prevent further attacks. As he walks back to school, Carrig says that when he spent the night in a neighboring town with his mother and sister, he saw 4 wolves attacking humans and comes to the conclusion that they were Jeffrey and his friends. The next day, as agreed, Andrew accompanies Carrig to the forest to teach him his first lesson. According to the man, the more often he transforms, the easier it will be for Carrig to control his 2 forms, and then the boy will be able to bring out the best in himself, both in human and animal form. Before starting the hunt, the cougar needs to define its prey and slowly move away to set up an ambush that will facilitate its success. After capturing the deer, they both share the meal and, hours later, walk back to school. During their conversation, Andrew mentions that he had a daughter who, if she were still alive, would be the same age as Carrig. That day, during recess, Lou notices that his friend has refused lunch and asks if he is not hungry. At that moment, Carrig reveals that he went hunting that morning with Andrew and caught his first prey. Upon hearing this, Lou gets up and leaves, as she remembers the day her mother was attacked by a cougar and has never been able to walk normally since. In an attempt to make amends with his friend, Carrig decides to go after her and follows her into the forest, but is unable to catch up with her. At dusk, while in his room trying to sleep, Carrig hears Jeffrey's howls and, looking out the window, realizes that the wolves are plotting something. In an attempt to find out what the pack is planning to do, the cougar decides to go after them and follows them to the nearest town. Once there, the wolves scare off a security guard to break into a factory and end up being caught red-handed by Carrig. When they realize they are being followed, the wolves decide to join forces to attack the cat, but Andrew shows up just in time and manages to prevent the fight before it even starts. At that moment, he orders all the students to get in the car, and while the wolves are taken back to school, Carrig is invited for a private conversation. Upon discovering that his coach is the person responsible for all those attacks, the boy is disappointed and says he should never have trusted him. A few years ago, Andrew lost his wife and daughter, who were walking in the woods when they were eliminated by a hunter. Since then, the millionaire has harbored hatred for humans who, according to him, have dominated the world and subjugated animals, causing the mass extinction of countless species. Over the past 50 years, the Woodwalkers Council has tried to encourage humans to protect nature and animals, but nothing has changed. In fact, things are getting worse and worse, and because of that, Andrew has decided to take action on his own. At that moment, Sheila appears to serve dinner, and Carrig notices that the woman is wearing a mechanical leg. According to Andrew, Sheila is a snake woman who was hit by a car while in her animal form. During the meal, the man invites Carrig to join his project, but the boy says he is not willing to hurt anyone. Upon hearing this, Andrew states that his goal is not to hurt humans, but to sabotage their machines so that they cannot continue to expand projects that could harm animals. After promising to keep what was discussed that night completely confidential, Carrig says he needs to think about his mentor's proposal, and the next morning, he helps Brandon train his combat skills. While running through the forest destroying everything in its path, the bison ends up being hit by Carrig's parents, who have traveled for a few days to visit their son at Clearwater High. Seeing his friend coming toward him to apologize for the accident, the boy tries to cover it up and invites his family to see his room. As soon as she enters the room, Anna sees a squirrel rummaging through her things and is reprimanded by the principal, who informs her that there are specific visiting hours. Before leaving, the woman says she will be spending the entire weekend in the neighboring town and invites her son to join her for a trip. Carrig immediately accepts the invitation and says goodbye to his adoptive family, as they need to take the car to be repaired. As soon as his family leaves, the young man receives a call from Andrew, who invites him to participate in an event that will take place that weekend. However, Carrig informs him that he will be spending the weekend with his parents and says that he does not like the idea of harming humans. At that moment, Andrew hangs up the phone and the boy decides to go to the forest to distract himself while practicing his transformation. Hours later, after walking dozens of miles, Carrig receives a visit from Wing and discovers that people were worried about his disappearance. While the shapeshifters talk, a drone appears and Wing orders the cougar to flee, as a hunter has sent dogs to track him down. After running for a few minutes, the feline hides in the treetops, but continues to be pursued by the drone. In an attempt to help his friend escape, Wing destroys the equipment and Carrig continues his escape. After running for a few minutes, the feline pauses to rest, and Shadow throws him some clothes so he can assume his human form again. Thanks to the support of his friends, the boy manages to return safely to school, but faints from exhaustion as he is about to enter the campus. Luckily, Andrew manages to find him and takes the boy to his house so he can rest. When he wakes up, Carrig tells his mentor what happened in the forest and begins to wonder if his biological family met the same fate as Andrew's daughter and wife. This thought causes such outrage in the boy that he decides to support the Millionaires Project and help him fight humans. Before leaving for his first mission, Carrig discovers that Andrew has sent some shapeshifters to try to locate his family and promises that, if they are still alive, they will soon be found. Soon after, the boy receives a call from his adoptive mother, who says she needs to cancel the outing because she remembered she has an important appointment to keep. Suddenly, Brandon and Holly show up and say they were worried about their friend, but Carrig orders them to leave. After driving for a few minutes, the group arrives at the mine. At that moment, Andrew divides the teams and orders Carrig to keep the forest animals away from that perimeter. Meanwhile, Jeffrey and the other wolves must evacuate the employees to prevent any of them from getting hurt. After scaring away some rabbits in the vicinity, Carrig discovers that his parents are setting up camp nearby and tries to think of a way to protect them. Terrified, the boy calls his mentor, and Andrew says he has seen Carrig's family setting up a tent in that valley, but assures him that they are safe. Seeing the angry wolves scattered around the area, all the employees feel threatened and, to avoid any attack, decide to flee in a pickup truck. As soon as the men leave, Dan enters the vehicle to knock down the stacked logs, and Carrig begs him to stop the mission, as he is afraid his family will be affected. At that moment, Brandon and Holly show up to help him, and the wolves decide to flee when they spot Shadow and Wing flying overhead. Afraid of being reported to the principal and ending up expelled, the pack abandons the mission and leaves the mine. At that moment, Lou appears and tries to convince Derek that there are better ways to close that mine, because if they destroy everything, the humans will want revenge. However, instead of listening to the girl, the man pushes her away and is attacked by the crows. Furious, Derek transforms into a grizzly bear, and Brandon joins the fight to defend his friends. With Holly's help, Carrig kicks Dan out of the vehicle and turns into a cougar to chase him away. The problem is that, at that moment, Andrew appears and removes the piece of wood that was blocking the wheels so that the vehicle can move. Feeling betrayed by his protege, Andrew jumps on him and the two begin a duel. However, upon seeing the logs rolling toward the valley where his family is, Carrig abandons the fight and runs toward them, risking his own life to try to save them. When she hears the logs coming down the cliff, Anna orders everyone to hide, but Melody does not hear her mother's cries because she is wearing headphones. Seeing all that would coming toward her, the girl starts screaming, but ends up being saved by Carrig. Desperate, Anna goes out to look for her daughter and is relieved to see Melody alive. The girl says that a cougar pushed her out of the danger zone, but Donald is convinced that his daughter is delirious. Minutes later, Lou and his friends find Carrig's body in the forest and despair at the thought that he may not have survived. When the cat opens his eyes, everyone is relieved, and Carrig rushes to check if his family is okay. Then Andrew appears and says he was walking with the boy nearby when he saw the accident. At that moment, the man calls a helicopter to take the family to the hospital, and everyone manages to leave unharmed. As soon as his parents leave safely, Carrig expresses his anger and says he will tell the principal who is really responsible for the attacks that have been happening. To prevent the boy from revealing his secret, Andrew tells him that he found his biological family walking in the mountains of Yellowstone, but will only reveal their exact location if Carrig promises not to tell anyone about what happened. Shortly after, Lissa shows up and Andrew says that Derek, his assistant, secretly planned an attack against humans. Although she does not believe that Andrew had no involvement in the destruction of the mine, the principal decides to leave when she hears the police approaching, but says she will conduct a thorough investigation into what happened there. Upon arriving at school, the young people are welcomed as heroes, as everyone has already heard the news that they saved the day.